Lawyers of Reddit, what asked the dumbest thing you've had to explain to a client? Story 1. I was hired to defend a man who molested his own daughter for 8 years. He forced her to perform oral sex on him when she was 9 years old. He didn't stop molesting her until she was 17 and she told a friend, leading to everything coming out and him being arrested and charged. He spoke with detectives and admitted to almost everything, enough to have a slam dunk conviction. I managed to negotiate a good plea deal that left a lot of his sentence in the hands of the judge and focused on every intensive therapy program available over straight incarceration. Because the sentence was up to the judge's discretion, I had a duty at sentencing to argue mitigating factors and aggravating factors. It was not easy to argue for a lighter sentence without downplaying the absolutely despicable things he did. It was also hard to swallow my utter disgust for him and remember that I was playing a crucial role in our justice system. On a personal level, I really wanted to tell the judge, lock him up for life, he deserved to live among society. The second hardest was when I was working in insurance defense. An insurance company hired my firm to defend a truck driver being sued after a small boy ran in front of his truck. The boy was killed in horrific fashion and the whole situation was tragic all around. The boy's circumstances were even sadder. He was conceived out of an affair. His dad wanted nothing to do with him and was a total deadbeat. His conception ended his mom's marriage and she passed away when he was a baby. His mom's ex-husband refused to take him. He was living with his grandmother in a run-down trailer and his deadbeat uncle was watching him. Nobody had taught him to look both ways. His uncle walked him up to a gas station and on the way back, the kid ran into the street in front of a truck going 30 mph. The scene photos are still seared in my brain. The truck driver was suicidal for a while. And the family that never wanted the child sued this poor bastard and his employer for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It settled for virtually nothing in the end. Basically enough to cover the funeral with a few bucks left over. Story 2. I was a public defender and had an older white man as a client who beat up a teenager in a drunk driving road rage incident. The kid testified at a preliminary hearing and thanks to some handiwork I got all the charges dismissed. The hard part was the kid was 17 and very gay. My client admitted to me and anyone else that would hear it that he was trying to get some Jesus in the kid and make him right. I never told my client and it's not exactly obvious but I am also very gay. It was a real moral and ethical struggle. Story 3. Not a lawyer, but my dad was, and he loves to tell this story. He decided to take a case to defend a man who had killed another man in self-defense. I don't remember what started the fight, but two men got in a fight. My dad's client tried to run away and get in his truck and drive off. Well, as he tried to get in, the other man grabbed his leg and started to bend it around the door frame in an attempt to break the leg. The man trying to flee managed to get a hold of his pistol he kept in the truck and shot the guy trying to break his leg. In most cases this would be a pretty cut and dry self-defense case. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses and the man defending himself shot every round in the magazine 710 into the other guy. The other side was trying to prove it wasn't his self-defense since he shot so many times, and unfortunately since there is precedent for this kind of argument, it was working. I wish I remembered more details, but basically he was able to prove that based on the way the events played out. When the man was shot he fell forward as opposed to falling away from the man defending himself and due to that the client felt like he was still in danger after the initial shot so he kept shooting. Story for so many, but he was a man in and out of prison and with clear mental illness and aggression issues. He was very threatening, rude, and psychotic. I can't give details but use your imagination. Anyway, during his trial, he appeared by telephone. Use your imagination. Why? When the opposing counsel began to give his opening speech, my client began screaming that the lawyer is a liar, total fucking bullshit, etc. I'm telling my client to let the attorney finish and we'll have our time later. The client screams at me that if I can't correct the lies, he'll have to do it himself. I tell him there's a procedure and we can correct any lies when it's our turn. He pipes down. The other lawyer continues. My client is snickering angry remarks under his breath, like fucking bullshit, etc. He then starts to scream at the other lawyer. The judge quiets him down but now he is yelling at the judge and shit is getting real. I'm telling my client to listen to the judge and not talk over him. Client finally ends his screaming. We barely finish. More snarky interruptions from my client ensue until the judge says that if I cannot control my client, yes, like a fucking toddler, that he'd lose the right to talk for the remainder of the trial. Somehow my client makes it through without screaming, and whenever he is close to yelling, I have to calm him down like Mr. X. Don't worry, we'll have our turn. The judge is pissed as fuck because what should be taken an hour took 2.5. Then he says, any final remarks, and I shit you not, my client addresses me and is like, am I allowed to say that if the judge doesn't side with me, I am going to. I cut him off immediately and was like, no, unless there was any evidence missing, there's nothing more. Till this day I am not sure what he was going to say, but based on a prior conversation where he said he'd bash someone's head in if they got in the way of his goals on the streets, I suspect it may have been threatening. Anyway, we lost the trial. Many weeks later, I heard that people from several rooms away heard my client screaming during his trial. Story 5. Imagine a courtroom that feels like a bad diner, greasy, cramped, and nobody is happy to be there. I am at the defense table, sweating through my suit, trying to keep my client, Tony Russo, from turning a bad day into a life sentence. Tony as a 30-something drifter with a face like a rejected movie extra and a rap sheet that reads like a crime novel. He is charged with assault for stabbing a McDonald's employee through the drive-through window, and oh yeah, they found a stash of powdered morphine in his sock. I am his public defender, stuck playing chess with a board full of pawns. Welcome to my life, where the stakes are high and the clients are higher. This all started at 2 a.m. in a McDonald's drive-through, where Tony, apparently craving more than a Big Mac, decided to escalate a burger dispute into a knife fight. The employee, a kid named Ryan, got a blade in the arm for daring to mess up Tony's order. Cops show up, find the drugs, and now Tony's facing assault and possession charges. I get the case, because apparently I drew the short straw at the public defender's office. The file as a nightmare, Ryan's medical report, security footage clearer than a summer day, and Tony's rep sheet screaming repeat offender. My first thought, this guy is toast. My second, I've gotta try anyway. I meet Tony in a holding cell that smells like desperation and stale socks. He is pacing, twitchy, saying, "It wasn't my fault, man. That kid was disrespecting me." I'm staring at the guy, wondering if he thinks disrespect justifies a shiv. "Tony," I say, "there's video. You stabbed him, and the drugs in your sock." "Not exactly aspirin." He grins, like he is proud of his creativity. "Kept it close. You know, I am thinking, close to what? Your foot fetish. But I've got a job to do, so I start digging for a defense, maybe a plea deal, maybe a miracle." Court day as a zoo. The courtroom has packed locals, a few fast food workers in solidarity, and a guy in the back who is definitely just here for the free AC. Judge Harper as presiding, a woman who looks like she could bench press me and my ego. The prosecutor, Mr. Klein, is a veteran who smells blood. His opening paints Tony as a walking menace, waving the security footage like it as a smoking gun. I'm countering with a plea for leniency. Tony has got a rough past. Maybe some mental health issues. It is thin, but it is all I've got. Then, the first surprise, Ryan, the victim, takes the stand and admits he might be mouthed off, saying Tony's order was a pain in the ass. It is not much, but it is a crack. Maybe Tony snapped under provocation. I am building on that, cross-examining gently, when Tony decides he is the director of this drama. He leans over, whispering loud enough for the front row to hear, "That kid deserved it, man. He was asking for it." The gallery gasps, Klein smirks, and I am hissing, "Tony, zip it." Like he is a misbehaving dog, Judge Harper shoots me a look that says, "Control your client or I will." I am scrambling, trying to redirect, when the second surprise hits. A cop on the stand admits the search that found the morphine was rushed, possibly skirting protocol. It is a Hail Mary, and I jump on it, arguing the drugs might be inadmissible. Klein objects, but the judge is listening, and I am thinking, maybe we've got a shot. The trial grinds on, and Tony is not helping. He is muttering during Klein's closing, stuff like "damn liars" and "setup." I am begging him to shut up, but it is like reasoning with a vending machine. I argue the assault was a heat-of-the-moment thing, not premeditated, and the drug evidence is shaky. The jury is out for a day, and Tony is on the phone from lockup, asking, "Think I am good?" I want to say, "Tony, you stabbed a guy over a burger," but I mutter, "We'll see." The verdict is a split, guilty on assault, not guilty on possession due to the search issue. Tony gets 3 years, not 10. He shrugs, says, "Could ve been worse." I am packing up, wondering if I should ve gone into real estate. Driving home, I am replaying Ryan's admission, the cop's fumble, Tony's big mouth. I did my job, kept the system fair, got the drug charge dropped. But Tony is out there, probably already planning his next drive-through disaster. I turn up the radio, let the noise wash away the day. Tomorrow is another case, another Tony, another chance to wonder why I keep doing this. For now, I am just glad I didn't have to explain provocation to a jury that already hated my client. Story 6. I am standing in a courtroom that feels like a funeral parlor, somber, stale, and heavy with regret. My client, Linda Carter, is a 40-year-old mother of 6, sitting there with a vacant stare, like she has already checked out. She is facing a custody hearing, accused of neglecting her kids, letting them live in a basement that has more dungeon than home, and here as the kicker, knowing about abuse by older cousins and doing nothing. I am her lawyer, stuck defending a woman who makes bad choices look like a lifestyle. Welcome to family court, where the stakes are kids' futures and my soul is on a slow burn. This mess started when CPS knocked on Linda's door after a neighbor called about her kids, ages 2 to 12, looking like they hadn't seen a bath in weeks. The report as a horror show, a damp basement, mattresses on the floor, and whispers of older cousins visiting too often. Linda's file lands on my desk, and it is like reading a tragedy script. She is a single mom, barely scraping by, with a history of bad boyfriends and worse coping skills. I am thinking, this is gonna be rough. My job, convince the court she deserves a chance to keep her kids, even if I am not sure she does. I meet Linda in my office, a cramped room that smells like old files and desperation. She is fidgeting, saying, I didn't know it was that bad. I was trying to keep us together. Her voice is flat, like she is reciting lines she doesn't believe. Linda, I say, CPS says you knew about the cousins, that as not just neglect, that as a problem. She shrugs, muttering, they rape family, I thought it was normal. I am biting my tongue, thinking, normal doesn't mean mattresses in a moldy basement. But I've got to build a case reunification plan, parenting classes, anything to show she is not a lost cause. The hearing is in a courtroom that has all business grey walls, a judge who has seen too many broken families. Judge Patel is presiding, a woman with zero patience for excuses. The CPS lawyer, Mr. Gordon, lays out a grim picture, photos of the basement, kids' statements, medical reports hinting at trauma. I'm countering with Linda's efforts part-time job, a new apartment lease trying to paint her as redeemable. Then, the first surprise, one of Linda's kids, a 10-year-old named Mia, takes the stand and says she loves her mom, wants to go home. It has a heart tugger, and I lean into it, arguing Linda's bond with her kids is worth salvaging. I'm feeling a flicker of hope, thinking we might sway the judge, when Linda decides to speak up. She is not supposed to, but she blurts, I did my best. Nobody helped me. The room goes quiet. Gordon pounces, asking why she ignored the cousin's behavior. Linda stammers, I didn't think it was serious. I am hissing, Linda, stop, but she is digging her own grave. That as when the second surprise hits, the social worker testifies that Linda attended one parenting class and actually showed promise before she stopped showing up. It has a mixed bag, and I am scrambling to spin it, arguing she is overwhelmed, not malicious. The hearing drags, and Linda is not helping. She is muttering during Gordon's closing, stuff like they done to get it and unfair. I am begging her to stay quiet, but it is like reasoning with a brick wall. I argue for supervised visitation, a chance for Linda to prove herself. The judge is skeptical, and I can't blame her. The ruling comes, kids stay in foster care, Linda gets visitation if she completes a program. She is crying, saying, you didn't fight hard enough. I want to snap, Linda, you didn't give me much to work with, but I just nod. Driving home, I am replaying Mia's testimony, the social worker as curveball, Linda as outburst. I did my job, gave her a shot, kept the system fair. But those kids deserve better, and Linda is not there yet. I turn up the radio, let the noise drown out the guilt. Tomorrow is another case, another Linda, another day to wonder if I am making a difference or just delaying the inevitable. For now, I am just glad I don't have to see that basement in my dreams. Story 7. I am in a courtroom that smells like antiseptic and shattered lives, standing next to a nurse named Emily Grant, who is 28 and looks like she hasn't slept since med school. She is charged with negligence for a fatal injection that ended a baby's life in a rural hospital. I am her lawyer, tasked with keeping her out of jail and maybe saving her career, even though the weight of this tragedy is crushing us both. Welcome to the legal grind, where the stakes are life and death, and I am just trying to keep my client from falling apart. This started in a small-town hospital, understaffed, underfunded, the kind of place where miracles are more hope than reality. Emily's file lands on my desk, and it asks a heartbreaker, a baby, sick with gastroenteritis, wasn't responding to treatment. No doctor on duty, just Emily, a lab tech, a urgent call, and a phone order from a tired doc for potassium chloride. Emily called in a sister from maternity, who gave the injection, and the baby went into cardiac arrest. Dead. The partners at my firm didn't want this case too messy, too tragic. But I took it, because Emily is not a villain, just a nurse caught in a broken system. I meet Emily in my office, a room that asks more closet than workspace. She asks shaking, eyes red, saying, "I was just following orders." The baby was dying. Her voice cracks, and I am handing her tissues, thinking, this is why I drink. "Emily," I say, "we argue you did your best with what you had. No negligence, just bad circumstances." She nods, but she has haunted, talking about quitting nursing. I am thinking, you rate good to quit, but this case might break you first. My plan is to lean on the hospital's failures, not Emily's actions. The trial is in a courtroom that feels like a morgue, cold, sterile, and grim. Judge Whitaker as presiding, a guy who is all about the letter of the law. The prosecutor, Ms. Lang, is relentless, waving medical records like they ray a murder weapon, arguing Emily should be known better. I counter that Emily was a cog in a failing machine, no doctor, no equipment, no time. Then, the first surprise, the lab tech testifies, saying the hospital's phone system was so bad, Emily barely heard the doctor's instructions. It has a lifeline, and I am hammering it, arguing miscommunication, not negligence. I am building momentum, cross-examining witnesses, when Emily whispers to me during a break, I should be double-checked the dose. It is not on the record, but it has a gut punch. She is blaming herself, even if the law might not. I am telling her, focus, Emily, we're fighting the system, not you, but her guilt is louder than my words. That ass when the second surprise hits, the doctor, who gave the phone order, admits he didn't specify oral administration, assuming Emily would know. It has a crack in the prosecution's case, and I am all over it, arguing Emily acted reasonably given the chaos. The trial drags, and Emily is a wreck, muttering about the baby's parents, how she can face them. I am keeping her focused, saying, we're almost through. I argue the hospital's understaffing and lack of protocol caused this, not Emily. The jury is out for a day, and Emily is asking, will they hate me? I want to say, they'll see the truth, but I settle for, we've got a good case. The verdict comes, not guilty. Emily sobs, relief and guilt mixed. Thank you, she whispers. I nod, feeling like I just ran a marathon through a graveyard. Driving home, I am replaying the lab tech's testimony, the doctor's admission, Emily's haunted us. I did my job, proved no negligence, saved her from jail. But that baby is gone, and Emily is carrying that forever. I mentioned the hospital's need for telemedicine equipment to a Rotary Club member, and they later donated some. Small win, I guess. I turn up the radio, let the noise drown out the weight. Tomorrow is another case, another Emily, another chance to fight for someone who has already lost too much. For now, I am just glad I kept her out of the fire. Story 8. The plaintiff is a man named Mike, 35 years old. He is lucky to be alive, but not so lucky in the limb department. I am the company's lawyer, and my task is to protect their wallet while the entire room glares at me like I am the Grim Reaper in a business suit. Welcome to corporate defense, where the only things at stake are money, morality, and my ability to sleep at night. This all started at a factory where Mike was caught in a piece of equipment that hadn't been fixed. Despite multiple warnings, my client, a manufacturing firm, had tried to add new safety devices, but the maintenance team fumbled the programming. Management as response, we'll deal with it later. 2 weeks after they ignored the issue, Mike lost his arm and was nearly killed. The case landed on my desk in a messy pile of incident reports, safety violations, and a $150,000 fine the company had already been slept with. I knew this was going to be a bloodbath. My job was just to limit the damage, push for a settlement, and try to keep the jury from despising us. I met the company's CEO, a guy named Greg with slicked back hair and a face full of fake concern. We were devastated, he said, reading from some internal prescript. But you know, Mike was being careless. I was rolling my eyes on the inside. Careless doesn't cost you an arm, buddy. Greg, I said, trying to be patient. The machine was a known risk. Juries eat that up for breakfast. He just shrugged, like it was a minor cost of doing business. My plan was to argue for shared responsibility, mentioning Mike's actions alongside the company's efforts while angling for a low settlement. It is not pretty, but it has the gig. The hearing is in one of those courtrooms with no soul, all marble floors, and a judge who has seen too many lawsuits. Judge Torres is presiding, a woman known for her hatred of corporate excuses. The plaintiff's lawyer, a pit bull named Mr. Hayes, starts by showing photos of Mike's injuries. He doesn't have to say a word. The gallery just winces in unison. I counter by talking about the company's attempts to fix the machine, painting it as a work in progress. Then comes the first surprise. A maintenance worker gets on the stand and testifies that he personally warned management the machine was dangerous, but they told him to ignore it. It adds a dagger to our case. I scrambled during the cross-examination, trying to highlight the worker's own errors in the programming. I'm clawing back some ground, arguing Mike had ignored certain safety protocols, when Greg leans over to me and whispers, "Can we just blame the guys we fired?" I hiss back, "Greg, that is not a strategy," but he has already moved on, probably planning his next boardroom spin. That ass when the second surprise hits. Mike's wife takes the stand. She is sobbing as she tells the court they have 2 young kids and now, no income. The jury is eating it up. We are completely screwed. I have to pivot hard. I start focusing on the company's rapid response after the accident, how the new safety devices were working perfectly within 2 weeks, arguing that they've learned their lesson. The hearing drags on. Greg keeps muttering about overdramatic plaintiffs. I have to tell him to shut up, because the jury is watching his every move. I push hard for a settlement, leveraging Mike's supposed partial fault and the company's reforms. The judge agrees to mediation, and we eventually settle for a fraction of what Hayes originally wanted. It has enough to cover Mike's medical bills, but not much else. Greg is thrilled. "Good work, champ," he says, slapping me on the back. I want to say, "Tell that to Mike's kids," but I just nod and pack my briefcase. Driving home, I can't stop replaying the day, the maintenance worker's warning, Mike's wife's tears, Greg's smug grin. I did my job. I kept the company's losses to a minimum. I played the game, but Mike's life is in pieces, and for that company, it is already back to business as usual. I turn up the radio, trying to let the noise drown out the guilt. Tomorrow, there will be another case, another Greg, another day of wondering if I am on the wrong side of everything. For now, I am just glad I didn't have to face Mike's family in the hallway on my way out. Story 9. Our work began not in a courtroom, but in a conference room on the 40th floor, where the air was filtered and the coffee cost as much as a meal. Our client, let us call him Victor, wasn't just guilty. He was a charismatic black hole, a man so convinced of his own righteousness that the mountain of evidence against him seemed like a mere misunderstanding. He was facing charges for financial schemes that had left a trail of ruined businesses in their wake. My role on the defense team was specific. I wasn't looking for an acquittal. I was the architect of the consequences. My job was to build Victor the best possible prison sentence, minimum term, medium security, a facility close to his family. It was a complex puzzle, not a moral dilemma. During our first meeting, Victor dismissed all my proposals. "I am not going to prison," he declared, gazing out at the city below. "I created jobs. This is a witch hunt." Victor, my senior partner, replied calmly, "The hunt is over. The witch has been caught. We are now discussing the terms of the bonfire." Our strategy was simple: concede responsibility where it was unavoidable and fight for every detail in the sentencing. We prepared testimony about his charity work and gathered letters from his family. Our most important piece of leverage was his wife, her genuine plea to let their children see their father. The trial was pure theater. The prosecutor, Ms. Reed, methodically constructed her cage of financial reports and witness testimony. We didn't try to break the cage, we just tried to make it a little more comfortable. Everything was going according to plan until Victor decided he was the best actor in the room. During a recess, he approached a reporter and began talking about the biased system. I had to physically pull him aside. "You just undid a week's worth of work," I hissed. "You need the judge to see remorse, not arrogance. They need to hear the truth." He shot back. It was then we realized our primary opponent wasn't the prosecutor, it was our own client, Asigo. We immediately changed tactics. We had his wife testify earlier than planned, letting her tears wash over the impression of his smug grin. It worked. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Sympathy, however temporary, was on our side. On the day of the sentencing, I felt nothing but professional tension. The judge, a stern man named Hawthorne, listed Victor's crimes one by one. Then he paused, looking down at our submitted documents. "However," he said, "the defense has made a compelling argument regarding family ties and the need for their preservation. 7 years, medium security, not the maximum term Reed had pushed for. It was a win, a technical, cold, calculated win. Victor, of course, was displeased. "You could have done better," he said as they led him away. I didn't respond. That evening, sorting through files in my quiet office, I felt neither guilt nor irritation. Just exhaustion. The radio was off. Instead, my phone rang. It was Victor's wife. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for keeping him close to us." I hung up the phone. I hadn't saved a good man, but I had saved a family's access to their father. In this job, you learn to call that a win. You close the file, turn off the light, and prepare for the next puzzle. Story 10. There are two. The first was a guy who was convicted for sex with a minor. He met this girl online, courted her, then drove a significant distance to meet her, take her from her parents' house to a motel, and do their thing. It was straight out of To Catch a Predator, except everything was real and Chris Hansen wasn't hiding around the corner. The girl was unmistakably under 18. His defense at trial was that she told him she was over 18. She denied that, and their chat transcript didn't show that. He was convicted and filed a post-conviction relief petition arguing his prior lawyer was ineffective and there were errors in his trial. I was appointed to represent him in this. This guy did not get it. He did the thing he was accused of and was convicted of. He kept blaming everyone else for his predicament, the victim, his prior lawyer, the judge, the cop. It was everyone else's fault but his. I told him he had no case, but he was convinced his conviction would be overturned. We had our hearing and it was very short. Petition denied. He contacted me later about filing an appeal, and I was able to get out of the case by filing paperwork showing that his case was without merit and nothing I could do would help him. The second one was a career criminal. An undercover detective contacted him about buying drugs. He wasn't randomly selected. The drug task force had intel that this guy was selling, plus his prior record was full of drug convictions. He was represented at trial by a public defender. The PD suggested that he cooperate with the drug task force to help to identify other drug dealers as a way to get a reduced sentence. This dumbass took that to mean the PD's office was working for the prosecution and was therefore corrupt. He demanded that the court give him another free lawyer. The judge denied his request several times, so he demanded that the PD be removed so he could represent himself. The judge ordered that the PD stay on as standby counsel, meaning he would be there as a resource for the defendant but not act as his lawyer. Around the same time as this defendant got in trouble, one of the detectives on the drug task force got fired for having sex with an informant. The detective and informant were not involved in this defendant's case. At trial, acting as his own lawyer, defendant tried to argue that the issue with the fired detective had an effect on his case. The judge had ruled pre-trial that this was inadmissible because it wasn't related to his case. He nonetheless tried to argue it anyway and almost caused a mistrial. While on the witness stand, he admitted to conducting a drug transaction with the undercover detective, basically proving the prosecution's case. He was found guilty. I was again appointed in a post-conviction petition. Again, everything was everyone else's fault. He said he should have been able to argue that the drug task force was corrupt. He argued that his prior lawyer was corrupt because he suggested cooperating with the drug task force. All sorts of nonsense. The dude admitted at trial that he did it. That hearing was quick too, and he went back to jail. He then filed a subsequent post-conviction petition arguing that I was ineffective, but somehow his subsequent lawyer was able to convince him he has no case, so they withdrew it. So I suppose the hardest clients to defend are the ones that blame everyone else for their problems and can't see that all their problems are their own doing. And those guys always file post-conviction petitions because they have nothing to lose. I've stopped taking those cases. Story 11. My court career was very short. I really didn't enjoy doing it. But I had one client who refused to listen to me, give me instructions, or respond to my calls. I can't even remember why he was in court in the first place. Maybe we were trying to defend a claim of shoddy workmanship he'd done or something. Anyway, the situation became untenable, and, in England, if you are the lawyer acting in a litigation case called on the record, it is actually really difficult to stop acting for the client. Unless they agree, you have to go to court and get a court order. English lawyers who trained in London will be familiar with the Bear Garden. It has a place in the Royal Courts of Justice where a scary guy called a master handles a long line of low-level procedural issues. Can we have another 5 days to file a defense? Can we postpone the trial for 2 weeks because a key witness is in hospital? That sort of thing. He also handles applications to come off the record. Now, I wasn't expecting my client to turn up, but I spotted him looking at the back of the room. So, finally, the master calls me and asks me about the application and why I wanted to come off the record. We are not able to get instructions from the client, said I. Well, that is fairly unusual. I don't like granting orders on that basis. Have you tried calling him, going to his place of work? That sort of thing. At this point I turned to the client who was at the back of the room smirking. Excuse me, master, I need to take instructions from my client. The master raises his eyebrow. I turn to the client and say, so what do you want me to do now? Fuck off, he says. Application granted, says the master. Story 12. Client showed up drunk for preliminary hearing on DW. Had him wait in hall. Told judge he was out there. Didn't he mention he was drunk? Somehow convinced judge to continue prelim based on total creative concoction. If he'd come in, the judge would have locked him up for public intoxication and been hot at DWI sentencing. Maybe the judge remembered his pre-bench days, just gave us a break. Story 13. Early in my career, I had to defend this gangbanger type guy clearly guilty of drug trafficking and gun charges, caught dead to rights. The guy was caught with several pounds of various drugs, ecstasy, cocaine, heroin, and a number of stolen handguns with his prints all over it. One of the guns ended up being traced back to a murder that happened a few years earlier. The only thing is that the cops messed up his arrest, so he ended up getting off. The cops ended up pulling down the guy's pants during the arrest and were taking Polaroids during the arrest. This was the late 90s. To be specific, the cops had this guy's penis out and they were taking pictures with their faces near it, holding one of those crime scene scale rulers next to it, touching it, and one of the cops even put it in his mouth in one picture. Part of me was excited that there was such a clear-cut case of the cops bungling an arrest to such a degree that the whole case got thrown out. But this guy was clearly guilty and got picked up on a murder charge a few years later. Maybe the couple he killed would still be alive if the cops weren't so perverted in their arrest. Story 14 may be a weird answer, but the ones who I think are innocent. It really means their life and their future is depending on you. If the client really did the crime, it asks lower stakes, I guess. You can spool up fancy tricks and wait for prosecutors to make a mistake, and the feeling of losing isn't nearly as devastating. It asks just me and my philosophical opposition to the prison complex, out there taking swings at the government. My personal hardest was a person who had lived a life of hardship and abuse, who was mentally retarded, and charged with years of welfare fraud, by which I mean they filled out the paperwork wrong in many ways, but one or two of those ways caused overpayment of about $10 per year in food stamps. Completely spent on food, not traded or anything. The overpayment only existed for 3 out of the 6 previous years. They got convicted on zero evidence of any intent to lie to the state. $3,000 over 6 years, all spent on food. I still don't understand why the state wanted to make them a felon based on those facts. Still hurts to think that I lost that case. I'm mad about it. Story 15. Not a lawyer. My wife is a prosecutor. She has listened to jail calls on multiple occasions from multiple defendants talking to associates on the outside about murdering their attorney because they don't like how they are handling the case. Seriously, one attorney filed a motion to drop the client. The other did not, so clients trying to have you murdered gets my vote.